council members and chair, yes, the decreases has to do with debt payments being paid off, as well as just right sizing the program over time.
There's no change in the staffing levels?
No.
So we should celebrate and have cupcakes or something. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I miss cupcakes.
Okay, so the proposed rate for stormwater is $12.36 a cost per month for the average household, which is a 3.5% increase. There is a bump here from 2016. This accounts for a transfer of funds that will support the increase in street maintenance, the $800,000 increase in street maintenance. There's a portion of every street that supports stormwater, the curb and the gutter. And so that is accounted for here and transferred out to support additional maintenance of our streets.
Is the Adopt a Drain program funded through this?
The Adopt a what?
Adopt a Drain? That's
Mr. Chair, yes.
That's terrific. That's a great program.
To summarize these 4 enterprise funds, the total change is shown here, the current 2016 and the proposed 2017 from 92 to 95. There is an increase in the stormwater by 42 cents, which is offset in a decrease in solid waste by 11% for a total increase of 31 cents. Increase of $3.52. Let me correct myself.
Councilmember Reich has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a little bit extended from the current presentation, but as we look forward and we see the interrelationship between water and our street repair, I think the other side of the coin is also going to be something we're going to consider moving forward that might go beyond how we source funds for water. If we're going to accelerate reconstructs, that's the opportunity, and we do say the pillar of our reconstructs are opportunities to do our full system. Things that are under the roads are going to have to be addressed in a way that they're way accelerated beyond what we've been able to do. And we're at one way or the other, and I'm not going to opine how we do that moving forward. We're going to have to account for that and make sure that we have a budgetary allotment that addresses this increased road repair will mean increased sewer repair. So just a heads up moving forward.
Right. Thank you.
Final enterprise fund, the parking system, operating 17 ramps and 6 lots and over 7,500 metered spaces around the city. This enterprise fund is divided into 3 particular areas: on-street parking, off-street parking, and the impound lot. The mayor's recommended budget for 2017 is $40 million. That increase is largely to cover an improved security system at both the ABC ramps and for the city ramps.
Excuse me, Ms. Hutchins, I just wanted to check in. Ms. Green, don't mean to put you on the spot. This is the expense portion of the budget. Can you tell me how the income side, the revenue side is on the parking fund? Or was that covered in the enterprise funds earlier that I missed? How's the parking fees doing, collection?
The parking fees, I'm sorry, Chair Quincy, committee members, the parking fees are looking okay as far as the budget, but I'm assuming that we will get through the more of the enterprise. I don't want to jump into Public Works budget.
Okay.
Right. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, to your question, we've seen an increase in revenue due to the mobile parking app to the tune of about $900,000. I think the on-street system is settling out nicely from what I can see and in my discussions with John Wirchus, and it's relatively new. We'll be tracking how revenue is affected over time.
Right. So when we're looking at an expense budget increase. We know why it's increasing. It's for that security measures that we're putting in those lots, but that's balanced off by the revenue side. I just wanted to highlight that, and I think we can get into it more when we look at the enterprise fund performance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, we have covered the general fund budget. We have covered the enterprise fund budget. We're now moving into the internal service funds. I'd like to take another pause here and make sure we're covering any questions on the enterprise. I think we've covered it. Mr. Chair, any additional questions there?
I'm not seeing any further questions, but I would like to highlight to my colleagues that I am using speaker management. It's a little hard for me to see some of them, but if that's convenient, that would either way, we'll be able to get questions answered. Just wanted to say that, as well as being joined by Council members, Council Vice President Glidden, Council Member Bender, and that's it so far.
Great. Moving into internal service funds now. These are just as they sound. This is our ability to service other departments in areas of the city. This is primarily fleet services. There are a few other internal service funds that I will cover in just a moment. But fleet services is our major internal service fund within Public Works. The program includes management and acquisition of all rolling stock for the city. There's over 1,800 cars and light trucks, and hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel consumed each year. So within fleet management, the program includes management and field support as well as operations. This is to ensure that our rolling stock is functional for all departments of the city. The mayor's proposed budget is slightly decreased from almost $34 million to $31.6 million. The primary reason for this is cost of fuel has decreased.
Can't disagree with that. I think that's great. But
Right.
I don't have a lot.
We do have a couple of other internal service funds, areas that we serve the city with. One is in construction management. This is a materials lab where we test asphalt and other materials. We also
Sure. I'm sorry.
Yes.
If I could interrupt real
Sure.
quick. Council Vice President had a quick question.
I just wanted to go back to fleet for a second. So I know in fleet services, over a significant amount of time, we've had a lot of investment in, there you are, kind of the green economy and updating our vehicles and turning to looking at different types of fuel sources and those kinds of things. And I just want to know if you could make any comment just about what percent of our fleet has been touched by those kinds of programs and those kinds of upgrades, and if those have produced cost savings we should be aware of, or how they've affected our overall expense and operation.
Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee, I'm going to start this one, and then I'm going to ask, I think, Brett or John to come up and supplement my answer. I am going to start with a more general answer to this, in that this is something that is an active discussion within the department and within Fleet Services Division. And as our vehicles are turned over, we know that we do have the opportunity to replace them with an alternate fuel type. Electric is our first thought. To your question about what percent has been upgraded, if there's been an overall effect, I'll ask for some detail from Mr. Sharp-Billy.
Welcome. Please
Welcome.
introduce.
John Sharp-Billy, Director of Fleet Services. Mr. Chair and members of the council, we have gone to primarily more E85 vehicles, primarily in our fleet in the police department. We are looking presently at CNG for our solid waste, as well as looking at electric vehicles that would go into our general fleet services area for regulatory services, public works, and in these areas. The types of cost savings we're seeing in the vehicles are pretty much offset by the cost of the vehicle itself. We're not seeing real major savings. A lot of the alternative fuels are designed for the on-road fleet. The off-road fleet isn't moving quite as fast as the on-road fleet, so we're not seeing the big savings that we were hoping to see.
And are we measuring just savings in terms of kind of CO2 emissions and those kinds of things?
Underneath the city's green fleet policy, we measure on an annual basis our green fleet output for carbon coming out of the tailpipe emissions. We only use SmartWay EPA vehicles that are rated 7 or higher. And are we seeing a decrease? No, we're actually seeing an increase in our carbon output because we are burning more fuel because of the type of operations that are going on in the city with the improving economy and the number of construction projects and the amount of equipment we have out there.
So in other words, kind of an increase in just stuff we need to do.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but
Anything-
if that could be balanced somehow over miles or hours or something, then you probably see a reduction at the marginal level. But
Very
the
much.
more you do, it's going to be it's going to produce more greenhouse.
Correct. One of the things that we've instituted this year, we've gone to an AVM system to actually monitor our vehicles for idling. And hopefully with that system, we'll be able to see which vehicles are idling and be able to reduce that, which will also help us reduce our tailpipe emissions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
I think I left off on our remaining 2 internal service funds, construction management, primarily the lab, paving lab, and field inspection survey crew, and also the traffic store, which is exactly like it sounds. This is the ability for anybody in the department or the city to obtain traffic control, barricades, cones. These recommended budgets are shown here and are very similar to 2016. Remaining questions, Mr. Chair, on internal service funds before I move to the next fund category, capital programs. I want to just describe what this is because it took me a moment to work out capital versus operating here. And the best way to describe the capital programs is these are the resources needed within the Public Works Department to complete our capital program. Within capital programs, there are 3 activities: surface transportation capital, sidewalks, and then transportation planning and programming. So surface transportation capital resides in Don Elwood's group. This is the engineering design as required for our capital program. You'll see an increase here from 2016 to 2017, as well as a slight increase in sidewalk. So this supports directly the increase that we're anticipating as a result of the expanded capital improvement program for streets. And then that transportation planning and programming, I'm going to tie us all the way back to the very first bar chart I showed you about staffing. This is the additional staff member in transportation planning and programming that supports directly the implementation of our capital program. Okay, the last fund category within Public Works that I will address today is the Special Revenue Fund. So there's really just one program within our Special Revenue Fund. It's Special Service District. These are divided out from the general fund because they are self-managed improvement districts. And this is the Downtown Improvement District and the West Broadway Special Service District. The budget from 2016 remains relatively the same between 2016 and the mayor's recommended for 2017. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I've worked through each of our major fund categories within Public Works, General Fund, Enterprise, Internal Service, Capital, and finally Special Revenue. And I'd like to open it up for remaining questions that you have about the mayor's proposed 2017 Public Works budget.
Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sure.
Oh, I don't get to go yet. Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm going to move on to part 2 of 3 of the overall budget presentation for the Public Works Department today. And that is the presentation of the mayor's recommended amended 20-year streets funding plan for 2017 to 2022. I'm going to introduce this portion, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Hager, who will present the substance of the work. And I'd like to just start by recognizing Mayor Hodges and members of the City Council for their tremendous leadership in passing the Parks and Streets Ordinance last year. This is no small feat. It took a tremendous amount of political leadership and community leadership, and the result, you'll see, will make a difference in the quality of life for the residents of the city. I have worked with many councils. I can compare what this action has brought to your city with many other cities, and you are at the forefront. So I want to commend you on your leadership, both Mayor Hodges and the City Council. I also want to take an opportunity to recognize Jennifer Hager and her team. They squeezed what I think is 18 months of work into about 4 or 5 months in order to present to you today an approach to the next several years of capital improvements. Jenny and Nathan Koster and Kathleen Mayell, along with the Kimley Horn consulting team, really was a monumental effort on their part, and I want to commend them for their work. Their dedication will show in the work that you are about to see. So I am now going to pass the baton. You've heard my voice for long enough, and I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hager.
Welcome, Ms. Hager. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you. Jennifer Hager, Transportation Planning and Programming. Here I have the pleasure today to present to you the amended capital program with a focus on the street paving program. So last week I had the opportunity to present to the Transportation and Public Works Committee a summary of the process that we went through over the summer and the criteria that we came up with. We'll review some of that here today, and then we'll go into more detail about what the amended capital improvement program includes. Just starting a little bit with our timeline. As you all know, the street funding ordinance was passed in April. We began work immediately. Our first month of work was focused on data collection and information gathering. We also did a fair amount of research across the nation. We wanted to understand what other agencies were doing in terms of project selection processes and criteria. And so we spent some time looking at other examples. In the month of June, we engaged with the city's Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Department of Neighborhood and Community Relations to develop a framework for community engagement around the ordinance requirement for a focus on racial and economic equity. The months of July and August were spent carrying out that plan, but also beginning to craft and develop our own criteria. In September, we pulled all of that work together and we did the analysis and we developed a recommended amended 5-year, it's going to be a 6-year capital improvement program, which brings us here today, which is one of the very first milestones in a very long process. We have a 20-year street funding program. We know the world will change over 20 years. We know that we will need to change with that. So to that end, we have set up a process that will allow us to track, evaluate, report, and refine as we go forward. This will offer us the opportunity on an annual basis to update our data, to update our criteria, to continue to incorporate public feedback, to make process improvements, to review how the program is delivered and to be able to report on our progress. Our work over the summer was driven by two overarching principles. One, that our process to prioritize and select street projects would be data-driven. And two, that we would have the ability to seize and create opportunities. So we developed a criteria-based selection process with a focus on racial and economic equity. We know that we want to maintain the overall condition of our city streets. We want to have a process to have ongoing updates and annual reporting, and we want to be able to continue to incorporate feedback. This graphic shows what our process is. It starts with a data-driven analysis that is 90% of the effort, and it concludes with the final 10% of work, which is the application of a qualitative lens. That gives us a recommended capital improvement program. A review of what our criteria is that we came up with. Asset condition. This is all about the physical condition of the roadway. It includes pavement condition index, safety, and utility needs. So we're looking at the condition above ground as well as below ground. Equity was broken into two different subcategories: community demographics and uses and mode. Community demographics included two geographic-based criteria: areas of non-white majority and areas of concentrated poverty. It also included consideration of vehicle availability by household and potential users. Potential users are measured by looking at population density and things like regional destinations, educational institutions, job employment centers. Essentially, where are the people and where do they want to go? Uses and mode is where we overlay our modal plans from Access Minneapolis and any service improvement plans that our transit provider might have. It looks at total users of the system, and it overlays all of that with our recently adopted Complete Streets policy, where we have a modal hierarchy embedded within there. This criteria gives us a list of potential projects that we then qualitatively ask ourselves, are there other nearby projects that will also be under construction? Can projects be combined to reduce disruption or cost? Is this the right fix at the right time? Have we addressed known city priorities and goals? And do other agencies or utilities have projects that can be coordinated? This is the criteria. This is the process that we used to develop the amended capital improvement program. That work also included a set of key assumptions. First, that all projects already within the recommended capital improvement program would stay in the recommended capital improvement program. Second, that in 2017 and 2018 primarily, we would focus on accelerating existing projects within the program up, rather than introducing new projects in those first 2 years. Why? This is all about project deliverability. On average, it takes us 2 to 3 years to complete project development and design to deliver these projects. This is also a little bit about the right project at the right time. Some of our projects could not move within the program because they have outside funding sources that are tied to a specific program year. Third, we focused on street reconstruction in the development of the amended program. And fourth, we are going to show you a 6-year capital program rather than a 5-year program. We felt that it was important to show that 6th year to really indicate the impact of this new money. Before we get into this chart, I just want to remind everyone that we are focused today on the street paving program. That is where the amendments happened as a result of the new street funding, 20-year street funding plan. But the capital improvement program does include more than just street projects, and those are all still in that program that's moving forward. So we have provided today some statistics to help demonstrate the anticipated impact of this money as it relates to some of our criteria. This is just a sampling of what we will be able to measure and report on an annual basis. percent of projects within an ACP 50. This is not a before and after chart. The green bar is showing you that approximately 23% of our city streets lie within an ACP 50 area. The blue bar chart is showing that about 40% of the projects we are recommending will lie within an ACP 50. A quick review of where the ACP 50s are and what they are in the city. The yellow on this map are showing areas with a non-white majority, blue areas of low-income population, and green, where the two areas overlap, are the ACP 50s, areas of concentrated poverty with a non-white majority, formerly known as racially concentrated areas of poverty.
Council Vice President Glidden, please.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity to see a little bit about this term before, and I was just curious if you could say something about why you're using this term ACP 50. Is that where kind of other planning organizations are starting to kind of call these areas, or what's our reason for using that methodology as opposed to what the Met Council used with the RCAPS language?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Glidden, this is language that's used throughout the region. So regionally, Met Council has also shifted from using the term RCAP to now ACP 50.
Okay, thank you.
Mileage of street reconstruction. In the 2017 to 2021 capital improvement program, we proposed a total of 17 miles of street reconstruction. With the amended 2017 to 2022 capital improvement program, we're proposing a total of 46 miles of street reconstruction. Granted, that's a 6-year program versus a 5-year program, but that's still a 170% increase in mileage of street reconstruction projects. Street reconstruction projects offer us the greatest opportunity to make functional changes to our streets, and that's demonstrated with the next two statistics. Opportunities to make improvements to the pedestrian realm. In the 2017 to 2021 capital improvement program, we assert that all 17 miles of street reconstruction would have offered us the opportunity to improve the pedestrian realm. In the 2017 to 2022 CIP, some of our street reconstruction mileage is on low volume residential streets that for the most part have narrow street widths with established boulevards and sidewalks. We do not anticipate significant changes to the pedestrian realm in that context. Therefore, we're focusing this projection on the opportunities presented along commercial or arterial corridors where the volumes are greater, not just the traffic volumes, but the pedestrian volumes. So in the 2017 to 2022 capital improvement program, we're proposing a total of 33 miles of street reconstruction where opportunities to improve the pedestrian realm exist, a 94% increase in that opportunity. We're also looking at where we have synergy with our protected bikeway plan. The capital program still includes BIK 28, the protected bikeway program. The chart you see here shows where we will have the opportunity to implement a protected bikeway along with a street reconstruction project, or where we can improve the design of an existing protected bikeway as a result of the street project. This mileage does not represent what will be implemented through the BIK 28 program. I believe that's expected to be an additional 20 miles over the next 5 years through that program. In the 2017 to 2021 capital improvement program, we had 3.8 miles of street reconstruction that aligned with our protected bikeway network. In the 2017 to 2022 CIP, we're proposing a total of 5.8 miles of street reconstruction on protected bikeway corridors, a 53% increase in that opportunity.
Ms. Hager, quick question. This data you're presenting, does that just include the city of Minneapolis streets, or how does that blend in with what we might be doing at the county level or even state roads?
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. These projections are based on what we're proposing in our own capital improvement program. So these are based on where we're going to have a street reconstruction project. It would not include projects where we're coordinating with Hennepin County, for example, and those likely would be implemented through the BIK 28 program that I referenced. There's, I think, an additional 20 miles of protected bikeway over the next 5 years that will be implemented through the BIK 28 program.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say how really wonderful it is to see this level of coordination between our bicycle and pedestrian safety programs and our capital budget. And it seems like a no-brainer, but it's been an evolution over the past many years, I think, of even coordinating with different staff within the department. And it's actually been, I think, a significant amount of work to get to this point. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you all for doing that. I wanted to kind of go back to the questions and conversation we had a bit at TPW when you gave the higher level overview about how we're looking at pedestrian realm improvements within these projects versus something that we would do more as a standalone project. And I asked partly because I think pedestrian improvements can be more expensive and challenging. And so could you just talk more about how you looked at opportunities to incorporate pedestrian safety into these projects? And then you had started to give a bit more information at TPW about our kind of bigger strategy around pedestrian safety.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. We know that when we have a street reconstruction project, essentially everything from right-of-way line to right-of-way line comes into play, and it allows us to take a closer look at what the design of the street should be and make geometry changes there. And so that's where we really have the greatest opportunity to change and improve the pedestrian realm, which has direct impacts on the livability of a street. So that's where this projection comes from, is where do we have those street reconstruction projects? We know there are still some standalone needs, and we continue to look at those as well through other programs in the capital budget. You referenced, we're trying to get ourselves poised to be able to make the right improvements at the right time. So the pedestrian master plan, one of our oldest components of Access Minneapolis, has listed basically a series of problem statements. These are the most challenging locations in the city from a pedestrian standpoint. And it doesn't have readily available in that plan the right solution at those locations. And so we have been working to identify the right solution at those locations and other locations that might have been identified through some of our stakeholders, in particular the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, so that when these opportunities come forward through the capital improvement program, whether it's through a street reconstruction project or a standalone project, we know what the right design should be, and we're ready to seize and create that opportunity to implement that design. So that's where we're working towards. So this is just an idea of some of the things that we are setting ourselves up to be able to track and report on. And now we can take a look at the impact of this new money on a map. This first map is showing you the 2017 to 2021 paving program as it was proposed by Public Works earlier this year. Everything in yellow, these are just the paving projects that were proposed in the 5-year capital program, along with what had been the total budget that was estimated. And now we add on the red corridors, which is what we are able to add into the program with the new 20-year street funding. So this is just the first 6 years of the 20-year plan, but it's showing you how much we're able to add and fill in on this map. I'm just going to pause for a second and let you look at that a little bit.
I just wanted to, while we're reviewing this, I remember Councilmember Reich earlier talking about concrete street changes. And I think, I'm guessing a lot of this red is things we wouldn't have been able to touch before without the addition of the revenues. And we're going to focus on some of the concrete streets that we hadn't been able to get to. Is that correct? Or am I just guessing here?
Oh, Mr. Chair, committee members, we have been working towards implementation of the concrete rehabilitation program, and that is reflected on this map. So we have been doing some pilot projects over the last few years to understand how to approach that work and to build our expertise on that. And we are ready to implement that. So you're seeing that on the map. We're now able to go in and rehabilitate some of these areas that we haven't been able to get to.
Thank you. Council Vice President Glidden had a comment.
So just kind of going from memory, my belief is several of those yellow sections were repaving projects. particularly the ones that look like they're multiple streets in a residential area. So of the red, you know, I thought the red was going to be primarily something other than repaving projects. So maybe could you explain what types of projects are included in the red? And then how we'll continue to evaluate, are these the right? So these would include the ones of just moving up the program. I guess that's my other question. Are these just moving up the program to get done sooner, or does this include any new things that weren't yet proposed as part of our capital improvement plan?
Mr. Chair, committee members, it's a little bit of both, and we have some of that detail for you in the appendix materials that you got with your presentation. We are proposing to hold steady our asphalt resurfacing program at somewhere between 25 and 35 miles a year. We're holding that program steady. That's the PV 056 program that you see in the capital program. We are adding in concrete rehab. That's a new thing, and that's some of the areas that you're seeing in red here. But we were very, very focused on introducing reconstruction projects with this new 20-year street funding money. And so some of these, a lot of these projects, and you saw the difference in the mileage, 17 miles to 46 miles, are new reconstruction projects. With the way that we are looking at our data now and the way that we are going to be gathering our data in the future, we are going to be taking a closer look at these neighborhood areas and identifying the right fix at the right location. So instead of assuming that a full neighborhood area should be resurfaced, if there's a particular street or set of streets within a neighborhood area that is in poorer condition than the rest of it, we will be able to go in and identify that corridor for a reconstruction versus a resurfacing, which is not something that we had previously done. And so some of those are also targeted on this map as reconstruction rather than resurfacing.
So that actually reminds me of something else. So you kind of touched on this, but I kind of want to dig into that a little bit. So I've had a project that happened in my ward that I think is part of a fairly new program within Public Works where you were doing this more targeted look. So there are some areas in my ward that, were previously marshland, and so really have a tendency to sink. And so there was a project that was done that was, I think, less than a full block project, actually, of more intensive work on curb and gutter and things like that, because the whole, area is sinking with terrible standing water and those kinds of things. So are those the kind of projects where you're going to look at kind of a more focused look, or I would also put into that bucket where you have pedestrian issues that kind of have to do with how the street is operating? So I'm just curious what might go into that kind of bucket of things that you're now considering, knowing even though we got a big program, we still only have so much money to spend. So I understand there's, trade-offs and that kind of stuff.
Mr. Chair, committee members, the program you're referring to for the project that was recently completed in your ward was completed out of the PV 059 Failed Streets program. That program is still within our capital budget and will still move forward, and it's targeted at exactly what you described. Those failed street segments, generally less than a full block long, that need to be addressed with a greater scope than a resurfacing project. For the projects that we're now recommending a reconstruction on that might be part of a larger residential neighborhood area, we will identify those segments by using the same criteria that we just discussed. It will look at asset condition, but it will also look at the equity criteria. So your question about pedestrian functionality is part of that equity and asset condition criteria and will come into play in determining which segments would be reconstructed versus resurfaced.
But I just wanted to touch on one other thing as Council Vice President reminded me here. This is an expansion of the paving program. And I just want to tie it back to the maintenance program. How does that look when you have a 5-year seal coat after a resurfacing? Have we included that expansion of the maintenance issues itself?
Mr. Chair, committee members, so the Transportation Planning and Programming Group is also involved in helping to define where the seal coating projects occur. And so it's fully coordinated with where we're planning for our capital improvement projects. We're also taking a look at the best practices in terms of when a seal coat should happen in order to maximize the life of that asset. So where we hadn't been seal coating before after a resurfacing project, for example, we're taking a look at how that would work for us to include that after resurfacing now, maybe the first year after resurfacing.